People have been waiting for Congress to grow a spine and finally oppose some stuff that this administration is doing. I'm not sure if we're there yet, but that start of that spine may be starting to grow as we record this. Cory Booker has been on the floor of the Senate, engaging in a talking filibuster for now 15 hours and counting. John, this is serious. For those who don't know what a talking filibuster is, this is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington stuff. This is you stand there at your desk and you talk, you deliver a speech, you read letters from constituents, you hold the floor. The rules of the Senate allow you, as long as you're talking, nobody can make you as a senator yield the floor unless you willingly do it. Cory Booker has been on the floor now for 15 hours talking. He's been opposing DOJ. He's been reading letters from constituents concerned about a looming constitutional crisis that I think we've talked about before here, John, and I know is on many people's minds. It's very clear that this administration doesn't think there's any role for Congress to play, that there's any role for the courts to play, that the executive should be, that the executive powers are expansive to the point of being limitless. Certainly, Congress could act collectively to do something about that. I know a lot of congressmen and senators feel individually that they don't know what they can personally do. I think Booker is showing to some extent what one person can do, which is at the very least hold the floor, demand attention, and give voice to the millions of people in this country who are outraged and feeling voiceless and feeling unrepresented.
I think that Democrats have been looking for months now for a way to. They've been caught between this, oh, we want to actually work with people to get things done, and oh, we need to oppose all this terrible stuff that Donald Trump is doing. And they're kind of been caught between these two things. And we're starting to see a pretty seismic shift, I would say, seismic crack between the Schumers, who are kind of going along trying to do what they think is best for the country, and the Democrats who are saying no, what's best for the country is to put a stop to what's going on in any way, shape, or form. I can understand the motivations of both, though I am currently in the camp of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, grind it all to an absolute halt and make Congress do its goddamn job and stand up and say, no, we have the power of the purse. No, we're the ones responsible for what has been going on in government. We're the ones who need to handle our business and pass laws and legislation. I think it kind of speaks to the fact that Congress really hasn't been doing its job for a long time now. And, wishful thinking may be here, but I would hope that Congress kind of learns a lesson from this, that they need to rein in power from the executive branch. I don't think of a clearer example of an executive branch run amok than Trump's tariffs, just willy-nilly imposing taxes on Americans whenever he feels like it for whatever he wants. That was a power that Congress granted to the president back, I think, in the 20s or 30s, and it had horrible results then, and it's having and going to have horrible results now. And ultimately, we need to have Congress stand up and say, no, our role on the Constitution is to pass laws, pass legislation, and get things done. And right now, they aren't doing that. You have a Republican side who is simply too scared to do anything, too afraid of being primaried by a billionaire who has threatened them at every turn. And we've read stories about how many of them are feel like their own lives have been threatened. Like there have been multiple interviews with private interviews where they anonymous interviews with Republican congressmen and senators who have said, no, we feel fear for our lives. If we step out of line, we think that this could go really badly for us or our families. And I think that is largely a result when you have a president who pardons people who commit violence on his behalf. This is the message that he tried to send. I think that is fully the intentional message, is that if somebody does violence against people I don't like, I can pardon them and there's nothing you can do about it. And that is a really serious threat, I think. And you've got to wonder how you work around that. I think the only way the only way you can really start to break this hold over Congress is by showing Republicans that they aren't they just by holding on to the Trump banner, they aren't going to just magically walk through their election. I think that people need to get out and show their frustration and vote some of these people out, vote them out in primary, maybe vote them out in the main election. I think that is going to put some fire in under them and say, oh, we have to start actually speaking to our electorate and not just a small segment of our electorate. It's gonna be tough. That's a tough thing to do because you're asking people to kind of turn away what brought them into Congress in many cases. So I don't see many of them ever listening to that. I think that it's such a small divide in Congress. The Republican majority is only a handful of votes. You only need a couple, and we've seen a couple. Representative Don Bacon, he has spoken out quite fervently about his displeasure and how he doesn't like how things are going, and that absolutely puts a damper on Trump's ability to pass things legislatively. That's why we've seen a record number of executive decrees. I'll call them that because that's what many of them are. He's putting FDR to shame for some of the things that he's not only the amount of things he's doing, but also some of the constitution defying things he's doing. He's putting FDR to shame. We're trying to overturn a constitutional amendment with an executive action. I don't even know where to begin on something like that, but he's been that's been laughed out of every court. His attack on the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship, has been laughed out of every court and appeals that he's gone to. So I don't see that going anywhere at all. And it shouldn't go anywhere at all. Let's hope. But back to Cory Booker, I think this is great. I think this is what Democrats need to do if they want people to take them seriously. Because if people see them as just going along to go along with what Trump is doing, even if they vote against things, it's not enough for the voter base. I think that they want to see, as much as I disagree with AOC and Bernie Sanders, they want to see rallies and people speaking out, and they want to feel spoken for. And a lot of people, center and center left, do not feel spoken for right now. I think you've got the far right that feels spoken for, and I think you got the far left that feels spoken for. But there's a lot of people in the middle that just don't feel like nobody is representing them right now. And I think that who captures that center is really going to determine where the next decade goes. Because the Trump administration, let's be honest, is not going to accomplish anything legislatively. They're not. They've never had the ability to do that. They're really not going to be able to pass any major legislation that really change the course of this country. What they can do is they can be a bull in a china shop with our bureaucratic system. They can kind of mess things up. They can kind of hamper things there, but they're not going to change things structurally speaking. They're not really going to make many changes, right? So, for example, the Department of Education, they're talking about, we disbanded, we got rid of the Department of Education, when in reality they just disbanded it and moved everything to the parts. Everything is still being done that the Department of Education was doing is still being done. It's just under different bureaucracies now. So you haven't actually gotten rid of it. You've just gotten rid of the title. And I think that's going to be. I think that's emblematic of a lot of what they're going to do.
I think there's another important element here, John, and that's that there's a lot of people, left, right, and center, who are willing to stand up for, are passionate about standing up for the American system of checks and balances. This is something that from a very young age, we instill a patriotism about what is special about our system of government that revolves around the separation of powers, that revolves around checks and balances, revolves around this idea that we don't grant unitary authority to one individual or to one branch of government to hold sway over these 330 million people in the United States. And it becomes hard Not impossible, but it becomes hard to defend separation of powers when one of those branches of government won't defend itself. And I think the process of Congress, even symbolically, even through the individual acts of congressmen and senators. And you mentioned Representative Bacon. I was going to shout out Representative Bacon as well for being a Republican with the guts to stand up against Congress abdicating its authority on tariffs and saying, look, that was a mistake that we did it. It's a mistake that we ever gave that power away. That's an Article 1 power. That's a power that's vested with us, that's vested in Congress, and it's time for Congress to start to take those powers back. Look, Congress has the mechanism to take those powers back. To the extent that they're absent that power, it's only because at some point they have granted it somewhere else. All of those grants are reversible merely through legislation, merely through an act of Congress. Congress needs to just start doing its job again. They need to stand up for that. But I think moving in that direction then puts wind in the sails where now you can see large swaths of voters, like I said, all across the spectrum, right, left, and center, who are saying, wait, our American system is not one of governance by fiat. It's not one of governance by decree. We don't wait to see what edict the king's going to put his signature on. We have a process. We have a process where Congress makes law. The executive branch administers that law, and where there are disputes about that law, it's settled by a judiciary. And I have to give credit to the judiciary. Judiciary is standing up for its purview as a branch of government, and not without the executive branch challenging it. This administration, I think, has about an 80% failure rates in the courts right now. And that's with judges of all political affiliations and nominated by presidents of all parties. But the judiciary seems willing to carve out its space and defend it and fight for it and say, no, there are things that it is our purview to review. We need Congress to start doing the same. You know, filibusters don't actually accomplish much, right? The record, and we'll see if Cory Booker beats it today, the longest filibuster in Senate, talking filibuster in Senate history was Strom Thurmond filibustering the 1957 Civil Rights Act for just over a day. I think it was 24 hours, 18 minutes. No. That didn't stop civil rights from happening in this country. Quite the opposite. That didn't win friends and influence people. That didn't create a groundswell of support for segregation. And thank God it didn't. We don't give that power to one senator to hold that sway. But what a filibuster can do is it can wake people up. It can hopefully wake the chamber up. It can wake the Senate's colleagues in the House up and say that people want you fighting for yourself. They want you fighting to be a co-equal branch of government. They want you standing up and say, look, some programs may need to go. I don't think the budget's in a perfect place. I don't think that the bureaucracy is in a perfect place. I don't think government does everything that it should. I absolutely think we need a Congress that is legislating, not a president who is legislating with the stroke of a pen. And I hope Congress wakes up more to that because of this filibuster today.
I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it 1,000 times more. The people who talk about how we are a republic and not a democracy seem to be the ones most annoyed by the fact that our republic requires judicial review, and they are trying to undermine the very republic that they claim that we are.